it is Truth and Reconciliation Week, and we are honoring the Indigenous people and taking a deeper dive into the culture, including the language. I'm pleased to have Arnold Fox joining me today. Arnold is the director of the Blood Tribe Social Services. And welcome, Arnold. We're so grateful to have you with us today.
Happy to be here, Jeanette.
Okay, so why don't you maybe start off by telling me a bit about what you do, what your work kind of looks like over there at Blood Tribe Social Development?
Okay, well, in relation to the Blackfoot signage project and in relation to the Blackfoot language, our department stepped forward to host what we eventually called 8 Weeks Language Committee. So 8 weeks means Blackfoot speaking. That's what that phrase, that word means, 8 weeks. So we're the speaking language group. And the task that was given to us, it was instituted a little over 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago. The major part of our task is to help preserve the Blackfoot language and to help the language itself move along and adapt to current terms that are used today in our everyday language. So that's why it's a dual function. We realize that a lot of First Nations across the country are losing the language. I believe there's some dire predictions that within 25 years, we will just have 3 First Nation languages still functional in Canada.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's quite astounding once you think about it. And I grew up with the Blackfoot was the first language, and I can't really envision not being able to use that or not giving it to our children and our grandchildren to be able to carry forth. So that was the gist of our task in that committee. The committee itself has 10 to 12 elders who come together once a month, and we offer an annual symposium. Blackfoot Language and Symposium in Lethbridge is the most convenient location. There are some representations from other Blackfoot nations in the area, Blackfeet in Montana, the Nation near Pincher Creek, and Siksika near east of Calgary. So those are the Blackfoot-speaking nations in North America.
Fascinating,
Yeah. So out of that, I would say I'm being optimistic by saying 20% of us still use that language on an everyday basis. So it definitely is in fear of dying at a certain point or not being utilized anymore. So that's what we're hoping to avoid. We're realizing now with the programs that we offer, even in social services, we offer short-term employment training for our clients. And we have fully realized over the years that one of the modules they take is the Blackfoot culture and the Blackfoot language. I used to take for granted that our younger people had this opportunity to learn at home and all of that, but that's not the case. In my generation, we were lucky that there was a very limited amount of influence from media. So the everyday language we heard all the time was Blackfoot, whereas our younger people are inundated with TV, just to start there, radio. I often tell my audiences that when I was growing up in the 50s, 1950s, we had a radio, an old radio that sat on top of a cabinet, and there was a big dry cell battery. So whenever the battery went dead, there went our connection with the outside world.
Sure.
We were particularly insular in those days, so we didn't have all those influences.
Yeah.
Just like one of my nephews, we made a concerted effort to have him speak Blackfoot from the time he started uttering words, and he was doing really good. Hey, we noticed that the words he was uttering up to 2 years of age were Blackfoot, but that's because in the home we had decided, no, he's going to speak Blackfoot. He discovered TV around that age, and what's that? anyways, he discovered it and was very drawn
Probably
to
Nickelodeon or, the kids shows, right?
Sesame Street, very, but they're all in English, eh?
Yes.
So we realize the influence that our young people have to live with is nothing like what I went through growing up. It was comfortable for me to carry on the Blackfoot language, but it's not that for our kids anymore.
No, that's so interesting, and it's so true, and it's something we don't really think about. You were mentioning that they're predicting there could only be 3 Indigenous languages left. How many are there? I mean, there must be hundreds, right?
Well, yeah, if you stop to think there are 500 plus different First Nations in Canada, there to get an idea. Of course, there's regional, like the Woodland Cree have a big area in most of the provinces. So that language I know will survive because there's a lot of speakers over an extended geographical area. But once you start, like I said, becoming too insular, you don't have that opportunity. And in our population
Yeah,
too.
definitely. So interesting. Now, Arnold, as the director of the Blood Tribe Social Services, I know that you are also involved in a Blackfoot signage project. And just for some background for our viewers, several organizations in southwestern Alberta, I guess, have partnered up with Kainai Nation to fund the construction of Blackfoot language signs across the region. So I guess this is to both enrich the landscape and invite locals and visitors to learn more about the deep history of the region. And I would say have the opportunity to see the translations of certain community names in the Blackfoot language sort of come to life. I find that really interesting. So Arnold, as the director of Blood Tribe Social Services, you're a part of this signage project, which will see these beautiful signs come to life with this language. So tell me more about this project and sort of how it came to be.
Okay, I would like to think that really the idea was planted as part of the TNR, the Truth and Reconciliation. All of the recommendations, I think there was 108 recommendations that came from that. And I've been noticing in southern Alberta, in my world, I travel a lot to Lethbridge. We're not confined. We shop in Fort McLeod, Cardston. So we have a lot of daily interaction with these communities. And the Blackfoot names that were assigned to these communities go way back. Now, there's some newer communities that we're going to have to sit with the elders to develop the name. So South Rose, the name of the organization that invited me to join. And so I did. And I didn't really know at first what the extent of the program was. But in our first couple of meetings, I've grown to appreciate that this is a really worthwhile effort for Southern Alberta. I don't think there's enough we can do to further the relations between the population here, the Blackfoot or blood population on Kainai, and the surrounding communities. There's been some excellent relationships that have developed over the years. I can two at this point that are kind of related to what we're doing. It just emphasizes more communication, positive in a positive light. So that's what we're doing with these. Now we're going to open it up. It's open to towns and counties. You know how when you enter a county, you see a little sign.
Like welcome to Tabor or Cardston or yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those are the two kind of that are foremost. Certainly welcome to look at other, but for those two, for the towns and the counties, we're definitely looking and hoping to get applications from them to on this signage. I'm thinking it's another opportunity for us to interact with the wider population. And there's another initiative that's looking at racism and working with the mayors of the surrounding towns and trying to establish a common footing to address the racism. Now, there was another project I was thinking of, but those give you an idea that there's more activity, there's more interaction between the Black community and the surrounding. We've utilize the towns, like I said, for shopping. 50% of our kids are bused off the blood reserve to the surrounding communities to attend school. So there's a great deal of interaction, and we just want to try and do our part to ensure that there's more positive chances than there are for negative interaction.
Yeah, no, it's such a fabulous idea, and I just look forward to seeing these new signs going up. And I believe the project is inviting communities, businesses, institutions to take part. And what they can do is, I believe they can apply. Is it a $2,000 grant that they can receive for the creation of this sign, right?
With the stipulation they throw in 500. So we're offering them 80% funding for the sign. Yeah. So I should mention also, Jeanette, that I explained to the committee that I'm working, to the signage committee, that there are names for some of the older communities in southern Alberta, but it's not always a direct translation. There's something that strikes our elders that's peculiar about this, and that sometimes they go with that. I'll give you an example, Tabor.
Okay.
Because Tabor sounds similar to table.
Okay.
That's actually that our name for Tabor is Idasuyo, which means something we eat on, which was the name we gave. Whereas Fort McLeod, Agapioyus, means many houses. So that's where the fort was established, and then the community started growing. So we refer to it as many houses. So that's been historically the name. Yes, and Lethbridge, Sikoho, Black Rock, for the coal mining history that Lethbridge was the central part of in southern Alberta. So it would be a direct translation or just a similar sounding word in the English language, like Tabor. Right?
I've also been told, Arnold, that you're a wealth of information when it comes to the language, the Blackfoot language, and particularly how some of the language has had to sort of adapt over the years to accommodate more for modern words, almost like, like the technology that we use, like computers, cell phones, because those weren't around, obviously, back when the Blackfoot language was coming to be. I'd love it if you could tell me a little bit more about that.
So we, at the annual symposium where we gather the reps mainly from Ghana, from Blood, but like I said, the 3 other Blackfoot nations always have reps there. So one session is always devoted, we call it coining new phrases, so the audience is invited. We always limit it to around 200, 225, and it's always full. We have to turn people away. So we know it's been a very popular symposium over the years. So in opening up that one session, we invite the audience to submit words that they would like translated. And we'd like to make a difference at this point between translation and interpretation. So we offer both. We can interpret word for word, but sometimes that doesn't necessarily work. So sometimes we have to interpret what the speaker is trying to say and then issue our word for it or develop our word for it. So that's been a major part of our work in bringing the community together. And what we want to do is, when we have enough of these new words, publish them in a booklet so people can use them for easy reference. There's been a number of other organizations that have developed apps for the Blackfoot language. So you just go into that and you get the translation for the, well, not the translate, the pronunciation.
Okay.
And the translation or interpretation of. So there's a lot of tools that are available out there for people who are interested to start learning it. So texting, at our second last symposium, we said, okay, everybody, even our seniors use texts nowadays, eh? So we said, okay, how do we translate it? And the most accepted one in the symposium seemed to be Stekkam Sinakyo. an object or a process where you write fast. So that's how we.
Okay. So it interprets into process where you write fast. Texting. Maybe not for all of us though. Especially when you get those clumsy thumbsies, and you're like, have to go back. That's not what I meant to say. Arnold, it looks like we're about out of time, but thank you so much for joining me today and having this really fun conversation about, some of the interpretation of Blackfoot language. It's really interesting.
Okay, well, I hope we have a chance as we move further along. I can report how many communities have taken us up on our offer, etc. Yeah.
I would love to hear that. Thanks so
Okay.
much, Arnold. Arnold
Okay.
Fox is the director of Blood Tribe Social Services. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.